Good evening. Tonight is a very special presentation. It's unlike any presentation I've done previously. So here is my wife, Eliza Priest, and this is almost more of like a reality TV kind of a presentation series, in that we are preparing to go to Australia. We're doing what we've dreamt of doing, or I've dreamt, I don't know if you've dreamt of it necessarily, but I've dreamt of doing it for many years. And when I speak with clients and prospective clients, I see this time and time again that people want to live between the countries. And so doing it now during a pandemic, during the restrictions on immigration, it makes it a particularly difficult time. And so given the fact that this is a particular cross-border specialty that I have in financial planning, I thought that maybe we might offer some instructive things. So I wanted to share with you as we progress through this journey. So we're planning on leaving in January. So this will be the first of 4 sessions, the first 2 of which will be from the US. The third one will be from quarantine, and the fourth one will be a month after that. So with that, let's kick it off. All right. So of course, this is not personal advice. No, a presentation like this would be complete without a disclosure. It's only for clients that I provide personalized advice, and you'd be crazy to act upon what we're talking about here without obtaining your own personal financial advice or tax advice.
Or immigration.
Or advice. Immigration advice as well. There's a fine photo of me, a little bit of background about me here. So essentially, I'm a financial advisor. I am the founder and principal of Arete Strategists and the Global Financial Planning Institute. We help clients, basically, here's the long and short, we help Americans in Australia and Australians in America. I got started working with business owners, and so when I encounter an Aussie expat business owner in the US, it's really, in the middle of those concentric circles, or same thing, an American in Australia business owner. So let's run through the outline for tonight. A little bit of background as to the 2 businesses that I run and the complexities that are going to be inherent in a cross-border move, what life in Minneapolis, USA has been like in 2020, a quick survey of all of the challenges that I've identified in making the move. And actually, there was one more that I came up with just this afternoon that I don't think made it onto this list, but it will make it into the series. How we're divvying up the responsibilities in going about making this all happen. Next, working through those challenges. We'll just be focusing on the first 4 of those challenges today, namely immigration, flights, quarantine, and housing. Housing both in what to do with our house here in the US and what approach that we're taking with the house situation in Australia. All right. I'm not going to do all the talking. Eliza's got a couple slides coming up, but here's the situation that we face as we contemplate this move. So I've got 2 businesses. There's Areté Wealth Strategists and the Global Financial Planning Institute, which is focused on creating a community for financial advisors. It's not a direct-to-consumer thing, but if you work with a financial advisor that you feel should know about cross-border matters, then by all means send them over to the GFP Institute. But anyway, the reason for sharing these things is these are challenges that we're going to need to think about. So I've got a rapidly growing wealth management business. I'm already managing staff across 2 time zones. We have client on weeks and off weeks, and the on weeks are intense. I mean, they're essentially going from one meeting to the next. How are we going to do that with the time zone difference in Australia, where if I were to start an 8 a.m. Central Time day, that would be, I believe it's like 11 p.m. in Australia, and I have to work all night. I mean, it's like literally the worst possible crossover of time zones. So that's a challenge. Managing the growth from afar, that's a different challenge altogether, as well as, of course, managing the growth of the GFP as that gets going. But life here in Minneapolis, why don't you run us through what life here in Minneapolis is like?
Okay. So we have a family of 4. We have 2 little children who are babysitting themselves currently, so we apologize for any interruptions.
No judgment, please.
And you know, we have a full, lovely life here. We have family close by. We both have fulfilling careers that we're very happy with. And that's, you know, there's nothing per se wrong with our life in Minneapolis, but you know, it's had some stressors this year, certainly.
And on those list of stresses, I would include the political climate's been ever present. You know, I think the partisan nature of how politics have developed here. COVID. I can only imagine how the folks in Melbourne have been doing with the length of the lockdown that they had. That must have been absolutely awful. And here it hasn't been a whole lot better. It was a case of there was a lockdown there for, what was it, about 3 months back in from April through, I think it was it the end of June or beginning of July or something like that.
I remember.
And then since then, I think the conclusion has been that it's really just not economically sustainable to continue that. So the numbers are going crazy, as you know, was predicted with the nature of the winters here. And living in Minneapolis, we're really in the center of the civil unrest that's unfolded. You know, obviously, I want to pay attention to the privileged state that we have, but it's very difficult. You know, in terms of where my office is downtown. Literally on 3 occasions this summer, I've come out of the office and there's been armed National Guards with M16s and Humvees, you know, parked up and down the mall. Currently, there's the mall is entirely boarded up, you know, awaiting you know, rioting as a political unrest from the election that just went. So all of this is to say that there's been a psychic toll to the situation here. Of course, we've all been through it. I'm not asking anyone play any violins or shed any tears for us. But just changing gears a little bit. It was 5 months ago. Liza called me up. I was on a mountain biking trip with some financial advisor friends, and she said, "How about this? What if we move to Australia for the next 2 years?" And I said, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable. I don't know what to say. Give me a day or two to think about it." And of course, I took some time and I thought, oh, there's going to be so many things to think through. But I came back and I said yes. And so that was in July. That was the beginning of July. And we've been on and off about it now for that whole time, actually till about 2 weeks ago. And the way I've described this to friends and clients that I've spoken to is I've said, this is like, the best analogy I could think of would be like training for Hawaiian Ironman, like an unbelievably difficult event, but knowing that there's an even chance that the event might not happen, or you might show up on race day and they say it's off, you know, your flight's canceled, you're not going to be participating. So it's been extremely uncertain, and that's been taxing psychologically, and you know, there's been other things that have come up in our relationship. But I wanted to mention this basic human needs model. This comes from a career coach that I work with, Peter Shallard, known as the entrepreneur's shrink, and he's adapted this model essentially of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So there's no Nobel Prizes going to him or anyone else for the mild changes that he's made here, but essentially we've got the basic security needs. These are the building blocks of working towards self-actualization, having security, connection with other people, self-esteem and confidence, what you do. And then, of course, getting closer to that self-actualization, or those self-actualization goals, with exploration, not just physical exploration, but psychological exploration, learning new stuff, love, having real relationships and feeling love in your life. And then, of course, having purpose in your life, and for most of us, that's in our career. So when I look at life here in Minneapolis and in the US, we spent 10 years in the Bay Area before moving here 6 years ago. The thing that I feel most acutely is a lack of connection. You know, I miss my friends and family in Australia very much, and of course, no one really is fulfilling their exploration needs right now. So that gets across from me. And how would you comment about your situation here?
Well, I think when, like you said, none of us are feeling exploration is particularly fulfilled. But otherwise, self-esteem is good, good connection with family and friends, safety, and then purpose and love, are fine here because I have a very fulfilling career, good family.
Yes. Okay. And then as we think about it, and this, I think it's one of the most difficult things to do, is to try and project what your emotions are going to be like in a different environment. But as I think about moving to Brisbane, I'm totally excited about it. That's going to be great. I'll be near old friends and family, and the exploration. That's actually the reason it gets a tick, even though it's currently interstate lockdowns in Australia. Is I'm a cyclist. I love mountain biking. Grew up mountain biking, and I dream about the trails and the rides in Brisbane, and so I think that's a pretty good short-term salve for me.
So for me, I'll be giving up my work, at least for a while. So that's something that, I don't feel reluctant to do, but I feel a little bit sad to do because I really do love my work here. And then connection, I suppose, is at risk because I have a few friends in Australia and certainly friends and family through Ash, but I don't have as much of my own connection to my own people there, and so that's something we've talked about because we need to be sensitive to each other and our emotional needs in both places.
Exactly. So this may seem unusual for a financial advisor to bring up a topic like this in a presentation like this, but it's so real. Who isn't thinking and facing these things as they contemplate, any major change in their life? That's one of the things that got me interested in life-centered financial planning. Is there's literally no major decision that we make in this day and age that doesn't have some sort of financial implication to it, some sort of impact. What if this doesn't work out? What if we get to Australia and Liza feels incredibly lonely and she's just, this is not going to work, I want to go back to the US? Then that would certainly have a financial implication, as obviously as well as a social one, but that's the reason I bring it up, is it's important to worth mentioning. So in terms of the challenges, there are 12. There's the 12th one that I thought of today that's not here. But this is what we're focusing on tonight, is going to be these first four. So immigration, booking flights, plan to deal. We'll do it before and after because the plans might not work out as intended, and the housing situation. So the housing one is the one I think, the topic I feel that has the most relevance to, if how a financial advisor would approach that. What are the sort of rules of thumb I'm using and thinking through that. But in the next presentation in December, I'll be doing a real deep dive on the financial and tax side of it.
What month did you say? December.
December, yeah. So next month, we'll be doing a deep dive on the financial and tax. And then in January, coming from quarantine in Sydney, assuming things don't change, we'll be going through a couple other topics: family logistics, Eliza's career and how that's working in terms of licensure transfer. It's worth mentioning, Liza is a nurse practitioner. You work in infectious diseases, of all things, and sexual health, coincidentally. And so how does that work to get that licensure transferred over to Australia? Business, that's a huge one. I think many folks here tonight who are business owners will be interested to hear what are the implications of moving a business from one country to another. Plan B, that's another huge one. There's every possibility that we get my heart was in my throat last Friday night. I had an email from Delta and it said, change to your flight. I was like, oh no, it's already happened. My God, 2 months out and we've been bumped already. It wasn't that. It was actually for a flight later this week. So that was, actually, no, it was for that flight, but it turns out it was an improvement, not a worsening. And the 12th one's not listed here is risk management. That's another big and relevant topic that we should cover. Okay, so how did we go about divvying up these topics? I think we, more so than most other couples, we've got a pretty clear delineation of who has an expertise in what given area. Namely, I look after all sort of things financial, and Liza, she looks after all things health, given her expertise and background. So logistics is interesting. That one's fallen in on my side because the main thing would be looking at shipping. No surprises here, would be the bikes. So I've got there'll be 4 bikes. I'll be looking at shipping 2 electric bikes, and so that's an ongoing interesting challenge because I think that electric bikes are only becoming more popular. I was at the bike shop just tonight and I said, guys, do you have any ideas how to do this? You cannot basically I won't say it's impossible, but it's cost prohibitive to ship an electric bike, like a 70-pound electric bike, not just for the weight. Actually, it's possible to ship it even given the weight. It's the huge lithium battery. So that actually gets shipped separately. But I'll save that to when we get talking about logistics in more detail. Business as well, of course, falls under me. And then for Eliza.
Well, I'm by no means an immigration expert, but I do work with a lot of immigration issues in my practice as a nurse practitioner. So anyway, that has not anything to do with immigrating to Australia, except I have a little bit of a familiarity around some of the processes. Anyway, talking about immigration, getting the girls, our children, their citizenship, getting me a visa. I haven't done a lot to prepare for quarantine except for monitor Facebook groups and stuff to try and learn a little about it. And I have talked to Queensland Health Department. I need to talk to New South Wales Health Department. Family, that just means getting all of us organized, getting the girls enrolled in school in Brisbane. And then of course my career is under my list of responsibilities.
And then in the middle would be the things that we've got a shared interest in. So looking at the flights. In fact, there was I'll save that story, but it's quite extraordinary. That one I think we'll probably remember forever. The housing situation, and then plan B. Plan B meaning we're not actually going. Okay, so in terms of immigration, this is really under Liza's list of expertise here.
So the first thing I would say is I don't think that our situation doesn't pertain to your situation necessarily if you're thinking of doing this. So the most important thing I would say is to pay for a couple hours with an immigration lawyer, an Australian immigration lawyer, which we did, paid for an hour of her time and then went back and paid for another half an hour a month later or so.
It was very convenient. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous how fortuitous it ended up being. I sponsored an immigration conference earlier this year. And so when this opportunity came up, I was like, oh my God, I know more immigration attorneys in Australia than I could ever possibly need. And so it was very helpful to be able to refer back to all the folks that I'd met in Melbourne back in March.
So for our situation, the first thing she said is to get citizenship for the kids, which is called citizenship by descent. And they do that because one of their parents is an Australian. They were born in the US. And then she said to get a tourist visa for myself. The original advice was to wait until the kids said citizenship, because then I would be more likely to get a long-term visa, meaning up to 1 year. And citizenship for the kids took longer than we thought. So then we decided, we reconsulted with her and she said, go ahead and apply for your tourist visa. The problem with a tourist visa is that you cannot work. And there's a limit of a maximum 1 year. So the reason I'm not applying for a partner visa or a spouse visa, or some people call it permanent residency, is because if I applied for it here, I wouldn't be able to enter Australia until it was granted, which is up to 2 years, I think right now is the timeline. So as soon as I get to Australia and I can apply for that, if that's what we decide to do, it's not cheap. It's almost $8,000 Australian. It's 7,500 or something Australian dollars. But that would allow me to work right away. So once the kids so I got my visa, the kids got their citizenship shortly after. And now we're in the process of getting passports for them.
What was it like when there were months that went by? We applied for the girls' citizenship back at the beginning of August, And the timeline at that point was 4 weeks, was what we were told. And so
no, that's not true. The timeline was up to 4 months.
4 months?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so, and then we waited for about 2 months, and within that time, the timeline that they were posting for processing was up to 7 months. So we had no idea if it was going to come through. And then all of a sudden it came through, I think about 9 weeks after we applied.
And then calling the consulate, calling the Home Affairs Department, what was that like?
Well, the consulate can't help with visa or citizenship. So that's just a non-starter. They're only, the only thing they could help us with was passports, which the kids needed citizenship first, of course. And then the Department of Home Affairs is just a brick wall. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of point in talking about it, except that you can't get any answers.
I called them myself once or twice, and the conclusion I came to was that if you can actually read, then there was no value whatsoever in speaking with them. I mean, zero value. They literally read back to me the site that pertained to what I was calling about in the first place, and I was like, okay, thank you. You know, very polite, very nice.
Very nice. And totally unhelpful.
But completely unhelpful.
Anyway, so the kids right now, the kids are in the process of getting passports. We have to get a 1-year temporary passport for them because we can't go to Illinois where the consulate is because there's quarantine between Minnesota and Illinois. So, and that's fine. They've been fabulous about it. We did a Zoom interview, and that apparently takes about 20 days to get. So we should get that in time.
And there was contradictory advice there, right? When you called, they said, doesn't matter if.
Yeah, it's a little, I mean, you really just have to pay attention to what's written down because different consular officers have said different things. So, you know, they're doing the best they can, but there's a few inconsistencies.
Yeah, okay. All right, so moving on here. Flights, wow, what a story that was. So I know we're not alone in this. We're all in this particular situation together. So how on earth were we to get flights to Brisbane with such low weekly caps? I'm not quoting the weekly caps because it seems like they're changing every minute of the day. But this is what I saw this afternoon, which you're about to see in a second, which was pretty much exactly what we saw as well. This is only 2 weeks ago. So we were needing to fly. Our drop dead date was actually one day after what we're flying. We're flying January 14th. And this is what we're seeing. So for 2 kids and 2 adults, it was about $10,000 a seat. And so we just persisted and thought there's got to be a way. But please don't judge us too harshly if we do end up getting canceled, because we're completely expecting that is a possibility. Given that I kind of view it like an auction. They're filling it up from the front of the plane to the back, and you know, whatever the allowance is for however many they're letting in, then that's what they're going to do. And it makes sense, of course, that they would do that. So how did we learn about the situation with the flights? So thankfully, I've got a lot of clients that have actually done this, some of whom are on the presentation tonight. Great to see you here. And I heard what they had to say. Unfortunately, the strategies that they had said that were successful, namely the last minute approach, like if you've got total flexibility, was absolutely not going to work for us, you know, in terms of renting a house, quitting jobs, and so forth. We essentially have very, very little flexibility. We must go within a certain period of time. So it was hearing about it from clients, Facebook accounts, maybe.
There's several, if you're thinking of doing it, there's several Facebook groups that you can join, which have offered, mostly helpful information. There's a lot of fluff on there, but it did give us some insight into what people are going through.
So then I was looking on Google Flights, but then I realized, I don't know exactly what happened for me to realize this, but the needle in the haystack that we're looking for, we were not going to find with an aggregator, because the accuracy of the information that we needed was such that this just wasn't going to fly. And we're seeing flights, as I'm sure you've all seeing flights that we know are not flying. I mean, you could see Qantas flights show up there and you're like, hold on a minute. Didn't Alan Joyce make a comment about these not Qantas not flying until September of next year. So internationally. So that cannot possibly be happening. And there was another one with, I think it was Air Fiji that we saw, where you would actually see flights until a day after they had already been announced, as everything was cancelled until that day. So you could book after that, but until you learned that in fact they're just cancelling it on a rolling daily basis, then you realize that's okay, there's another one that's not going to work. Then we saw, I think it was EVA, where there was a layover in Taipei, but the layover was such that if you weren't reading it closely enough, it said if your layover is greater than 8 hours, you get thrown into quarantine. So that's not an option. Okay, so forget about that. Which really, and then we looked at Etihad, and that was like a 58-hour flight, and that might have worked, who knows? But eventually we ended up zeroing down to the major American carriers. So Delta, American. We looked at Air New Zealand, even went down that particular avenue where we called them and inquired about if you could book to Auckland and then get a separate ticket from Auckland to Brisbane or Sydney from there. And they said, no, that doesn't work. And
I think they have opened up a lot more, because now what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are able to book on Air New Zealand. So I think that's changed for whatever that's worth. But I think the point is, you don't go through Google Flights or Kayak or any aggregator like that. You need to go directly through an airline to make sure you're getting on flights that actually exist.
And it's such a dynamic and changing situation that we wanted to get the perspective from Australia. So I remembered at the back of my brain, I remembered a friend of mine was friends with a travel agent, and so I called that friend. He put me in touch with his travel agent buddy, who could tell stories like chartering planes to get people out of desperate situations. And I thought, this is my guy. We've got to talk to Craig. And so we did. Nothing came of that. Until one day, about 2.5 weeks ago, it was a Monday afternoon.
Was it only that long?
And maybe
it's longer.
Maybe it was 3 weeks ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Liza and I were both on the phone at the exact same time, and Liza texted and said, "I've got flights with American," and I said, "I've got flights with Delta." And the way it happened, I'll just quickly tell my story with Delta. I was running through their search engine, and I'd entered all our parameters, and it said, flights between this price and that price. It was like $2,500 and $40,000 a seat or something like that. And I went to the results page, and the $2,500 number was not there. I was like, hold on, what's going on? Like, why is it saying on one page that there's $2,500 and the next page there's nothing there? So I called them. I mean, talk about going to the lowest tech solution. I called them up and I said, I'm seeing this result. What's going on? And she said, yep, there's 4 seats available. You can totally do it. It's $2,500 one way. Still about triple probably what that would normally cost for a one way on their. They don't call it business class. It's something
economy plus, I think is what it's called, something like that.
It's not. It's like a special international class. It's not economy plus, but anyway. So it's about triple what it normally is. And like I said, there's every chance we might get bumped, but that's what I saw. What did you see on American?
I just saw a flight on American that was, again, one way, $1,400 per person, on the date we wanted to go. So what we were seeing is on the dates we wanted to go, which was at the latest mid-January, it was, upwards of $30,000 for a family of 4. And you could get cheaper flights if you were, several weeks beyond that, looking for several weeks beyond that. And I don't know why these flights popped up on American, but they happened to pop up, and they were $1,400 per person, and they were on the dates we wanted to go. So I called American right away, and Ash and I literally texted each other within seconds of each other, both saying, look, I can't call you because I'm on the phone with the airline. I want to book flights. And he said the same thing. And so what we decided to do, because we couldn't really talk it through, was we both booked the flights. I booked with American, he booked with Delta. They were 1 week apart. And then, we had 24 hours to talk it through and cancel one of the reservations. So
I'll just see what these questions are. It's not letting me see the questions without getting out of presentation mode. So Brett writes, why did you leave the Bay Area? To be near family in Minneapolis.
We love the Bay Area. Where am I? There I am. We love the Bay Area. Love the Bay Area. Miss it like crazy, but it's incredibly expensive. And we were going to start a family and we couldn't afford a house out there at that time. And we didn't have any family support. So my family's in Minneapolis.
Okay. And I see here, here we are. Colin's got some comments here. We were told that if you have a 600 tourist visa and applied for a partner visa, that bridging visa would not take effect until the partner visa expired. That is most, tourist visas are valid for 3 months. Thus, for me, it will be 3 months after arrival before the bridging visa takes effect and I can work.
Yeah, that's not what I learned. So hopefully one of us has the right advice. My visa's for 12 months. And I was told that anytime I can apply for the partner visa, and that automatically, that what you get automatically is the bridging visa. And then the partner visa is granted after, they've decided to grant you it, which could be a long, long, long time, but that the bridging visa just, you just have that until the partner visa is granted.
Actually, I think there was a bullet point that we couldn't see because of the Zoom menu over the top there, but that's another challenge with immigration is if we do go ahead and apply for permanent residency for Liza, we were told that that's going to take years to process, very likely to exceed the time that we're even in Australia for, which is a challenge because you actually have to be in Australia to receive that. So that's going to mean another flight, possibly a gunshot trip back to Australia at some point to go get that.
The other thing is that my visa, that's a tourist visa, which I think is probably standard for tourist visas, is every time you leave the country, it restarts. So we could make my tourist visa last for 2 years if we stay for 11 and a half months and pop over to New Zealand and then pop back. That 12 months starts over. So then I could be there another entire 12 months as long as I've left and returned before the time expires that you have to have entered Australia. So again, that's why we are not immigration experts. I don't want to give immigration advice, but that's why I really think you should it's worth spending a few $100s with an immigration lawyer for an hour and map out your options.
So quarantine, another one. So how are we going to get through that with 2 kids and running 2 businesses simultaneously? Well, again, I've been very lucky to hear a lot about this from firsthand accounts of clients that have gone through it. Facebook stories, Liza's mostly heard about that. Do you want to talk about what you've heard there on the?
Yeah, again, I think none of this can be taken as any sort of truth because it's really up to the immigration authorities when you get there. But what seem to be the consistent messages are you cannot choose where you go. You cannot choose the room you get. I have heard that if you offer to pay more, you can get upgraded at some hotels. Like you get to the hotel, you get to reception, you say, I'm willing to pay X amount of dollars more per night to get an adjoining room or to get a bigger room or to get a kitchenette or something. So some places do allow that. There seems to be, of course, preference given to families to have apartment style lodgings. That's, I don't know. Food.
What else there? So apparently, they do provide 3 meals a day, thankfully. They're not going to starve there.
Yeah, the quality seems to be extremely variable. Woolies and Kohl's will do grocery deliveries. So your family and friends can deliver things to the front desk and it'll get to you.
But not on the day of arrival. So
no, they can't. Well, there have been some people that say Woolies and Kohl's will deliver within a couple hours. I think that's inconsistent.
If you're a smoker, it might be time to think about quitting because
it seems pretty inconsistent that there's any special treatment for smokers, meaning outside breaks.
You're given nicotine patches and told it's a good time to quit. That's what
several people have said.
Okay, so Oh, the other thing is, from what we're monitoring at the moment, is it is possible to do quarantine in New South Wales and then get to Sydney, provided you can account essentially, for every moment of your time.
You mean and then get to Brisbane?
What did I say?
Sydney.
Sydney. Oh, you shouldn't have any trouble getting to Sydney. I mean, get to Brisbane from there. So if you can account for your time and prove that you came directly from the hotel to the airport, then the word on the street and and Facebook and so forth is that that's not necessary.
So it's actually word from Queensland Public Health Department, because I called them, and they said, because we didn't realize, we thought if we can't fly into Brisbane and we were having trouble finding flights directly in Brisbane, we thought quite erroneously that you had to quarantine twice. So you might all already know this, but if you quarantine in the state where you arrive, you just have to have a receipt from the taxi that you take from the quarantine hotel to the airport. You obviously have to have your negative COVID tests. And that's it. You just have to prove that you basically went from your quarantine hotel directly to the airport.
All right. And next, okay, so this is more up my alley right here, is the renting of the house. I had thought about getting into the financial side, like how I did this analysis, because honestly, that was the very first thing that came up is, can we even afford to do this trip? I mean, going at a time when flights are 3 times what they are, cost of quarantine, dealing with that dog, and business compliance matters, 1,000,001 things. It's a very expensive trip to do. And what my analysis showed was that we can do it, but we must rent our house, because it looked as though the comps were coming back in at about $3,000 a month. So multiply that times 20 being the period of time that we're looking at going for. Could we do this with $60,000 less income? No, it's not going to work. It's going to be just a little bit too tight. So that led us into, to figuring out, what's our house going to rent for relative to others on our street. And honestly, I tend to veer towards the side of, let's go slightly lower with a higher probability of having the place fully rented for that time, because trying to shoot for another couple $100 a month more is going to introduce some uncertainty that we're really not wanting to entertain at this time. So of course, the topic of property management came up. We do have family across the street, so might it be possible to have them do it? They're not my family across the street, so Liza's the one. There was kind of a little head shake right there. No, that's not going to happen. And also, what if a tenant moves out after 6 months? And we have to replace. You go marketing for a tenant from overseas. Not viable. So really, the focus there was on finding property management, and we ended up with what we think is a pretty good deal. So the firm that we've chosen to work with, and property management is another one of these extremely variable services around the world, even where prices vary so much from place to place. The deal that we've settled upon is it's 1 month's rent, and that's essentially the cost of their marketing activities, and I'll talk about that momentarily, and $100 a month for the actual management. So what impressed me about the firm that we chose was that there's a younger guy, very confident, maybe a little too confident, but that's another story for another time. He was really tech savvy, and I felt his approach was really well suited to a pandemic. So he gets on his GoPro helmet or camera, and he goes through and does literally like a 12-minute video walking through every room and every angle of your house, so as to reduce the need for in-person tours. So that way folks can get a really good sense of what the front of the house, the back of the house, outside, the garage, upstairs, downstairs, basement, everywhere looks like, without actually having to trudge through the house. So that's what it was. It's 1 month, first month's rent, and then $100 a month. The most difficult thing, and also the most boring thing, so I'll keep this really short, was the staging. We worked for, a couple months, painted the outside, painted the inside, new deck, so cleaned all the windows, cleaned everything, and got it ready as if we were selling the house. And then obviously put it up for sale. Let me just take a quick moment.
Put it up for rent.
Put it up for rent. Let me just take a quick moment here. More questions coming through here. So Kylie writes, I completed a round of quarantine in Sydney with a 16-month-old in August. It's challenging for sure. I believe it is. My goodness, Kylie. Kylie then wrote, the Australian government are talking about modifications to the quarantine process where we're wearing ankle bracelets so it can be monitored at home. I haven't heard that one. That's interesting.
I think so far it's not, I mean, I think so far they've decided it's not really viable. I've heard people say it's extremely expensive because you have to pay for all that monitoring. So I don't know.
Well, I had heard of that you can hire your own guards to guard you around the clock.
Yeah, that's all here. Like it's all just here.
$25,000 for the 2 weeks to do that, though. Craig, how you doing, Craig? Hope you're well. Why now? Seems like if you wait a year, it would be cheaper and less complicated. Completely agree. Really, there's two reasons for that, and that's to do with the ages of our girls. They're 3 and 5, so the thought is that the amount of disruption to their lives and our lives at this exact moment is less. And also living in Minnesota, where the winters are not known to be particularly.
Yeah, the COVID winter here is starting to be really challenging.
Oh man, I mean, here's the thing. We live across the street from our in-laws and Liza's brother, and we may as well live in a different country because we don't get to sit, we don't have dinner together. There's the fears about anyone having COVID, not knowing that they've got it, and being responsible for some elderly folks getting it and possibly dying is too great a risk to run in terms of seeing it. So we kind of run on this permanent lockdown. That's the answer to your question, Craig.
Somebody says, talk about your dog issues. Ours have been so challenging.
Don't stop.
Well, I mean, we just decided that bringing him was just not going to work. And so we just started posting on our neighborhood listservs and stuff, looking for a good family for him. And there was quite a response. And so we interviewed several families, and he's just going to a foster family. So he's in the process of spending weekends with them and stuff. So he gets used to them and they get used to him. And
maybe we'll talk more about that on the logistics topic, because it's been interesting. We just went on I went on a gut hunch that importing him or bringing him to Australia was going to be prohibitively expensive. Then a client who loves her dog actually had done all that research, and I was right. But then it turned out that he's quite the star in the neighborhood, so he's had no troubles getting attention. Okay, so next, this is the risk management topic that I'm going to just talk about here briefly. Again, this is not personal advice. You'd be wise to get your own personal advice, but this is what we're doing. I should mention I was formerly a professor in risk management at UC Berkeley Extension and Golden Gate. But that being said, so we're going to create an LLC for the house. Easy to do in Minnesota, really cheap to set up, and annual renewals are next to nothing. Get separate bank accounts for the LLC. That way we're limiting the liability in the event of a claim on the house to merely the value of the house. Hopefully we don't lose the house, and that's why we get insurance. So that's an interesting one. I'm a big fan of the insurance company that I currently use and recommend to all my clients, not because they're cheap. That's not the goal of insurance. The goal is to make sure that you've got a carrier that is there at claims time. And we had been clients of theirs for about 10 years before we had a claim last year. And then we had one, and it was everything that we had hoped it and how we would be treated. Went extremely well. In any event, we may have to change insurers because we'll be migrating from a homeowner's policy to a landlord's policy. Depending on the carrier, that will determine whether or not liability coverage is offered on a worldwide basis. Obviously, that's preferable. That would mean while we're in Australia, we're actually covered under our landlord's policy back in the US for our liability-related actions on a personal basis that happen in Australia. We'll be sure that the named folks on the policy are us as individuals. The house resides in a revocable living trust, and the reasons for doing that are less risk management, more to do with estate planning. But the revocable living trust does nothing for risk management. So having us as individuals does give us additional liability protection. We need to get renter's insurance for valuable personal property, like those bikes that may be remaining in a family member's basement. And we'll require that our tenants have renter's insurance with liability coverage equal to or greater than the rebuild cost of the home. That way, if there's a party, if they burn the place down and we can hold them liable, at least we get our house rebuilt, or at least our landlord's owner's insurance would subrogate that risk against the tenant's renter's policy. And we'll also remind them that our policy does not cover anything for them. We are leaving, this is another interesting detail, I think. There are some things here that are so hard to move. And we're moving out for 20 months. We don't want to move absolutely everything. No way. So I've got a home gym here, or we've got a home gym with a treadmill, an exercise bike, a rowing machine, a weights machine. And to move that, oh my Lord, what a hassle. But what a blessing it's been during COVID. It's really coming to its own when we can't go to the gym normally. So hopefully people would be comfortable in using that and see value in it. Well, now I need to insure myself against my tenants for my own property, or for theft in particular. Won't cover damage. That's what their deposit is for. But if things go missing, then that's where the landlord's policy would come into it. And I'm going to pull out a bit of an analysis that I did on this situation here. To buy or rent, we've been going back and forth on this, and I know clients and long-term viewers of my webisodes here will know that I'm always very negative on the idea of being a non-resident property owner in Australia, because of the non-resident rates of tax, the lack of capital gains exemptions, and a whole host of other local and state taxes you can even get hit with. But being a financially conservative kind of guy, we're wanting to rent for at least 6 months before making that decision. And that's just, even though I'm from Brisbane originally, I've been back many, many times over the years, who knows what it's really like to live in a place that you haven't lived in for 15 years. So anyway, the point B here is I've had an assistant of mine reach out to realtors in the area that we're looking at. And this was actually advice given by a realtor when I called about a month ago about a property I really liked. And she said, be sure to send us an introductory note, a little bit about your situation, what you're looking for, the length of the lease, and we'll keep you in mind when things come on the market, and maybe that could be an advantage. So I wanted to share that here. So developing a little bit more on this buy versus rent decision, as I said, I want to rent for 6 months anyway, but I'm really mindful of the opportunities that are available as a first homeowner in Australia, stamp duty concessions and other grants that are made available. I don't want to waste that. And so we were just talking about this at dinner tonight, and I'll run you through this hypothetical, and you'll see where we've landed up. And at least tonight, on what is it, Tuesday the 17th? Excuse me. So a reserve. Here's what I found from Wikipedia. Whoops. Siri heard me say that. In fact, maybe I should have said SIRI, because she'd pipe up again if she heard me say it. So we reserve our right to change our minds on this one, but right now we're really leaning towards just renting for the whole time, and I'll get into that in more detail. As you can see here, the current Australian non-resident tax rates. If we were to be renting this and making money from it, we'd be paying 32.5% from the first dollar, and having to file taxes in Australia after we've left. Obviously, we'll have to file in the time that we're there, given that we'll be deemed Australian tax residents. Let me run you through that. So here's a spreadsheet I put together. I'll just get these Q&A panels and chat panels out of the way. But while I do that, see if there's anything else. Thank you, Colin. Anything else that's come along? No, there isn't. Okay, so here's the scenario that I pondered. I said, now hypothetically, what if we could put 200,000 down and we're looking at $1 million property? How would that play out if our holding period was, say, 5 years and we sold for 1.1 million? Again, I always try and use conservative numbers. Might growth be higher than that? Absolutely, it might. It could, of course, be lower. But let's just say we make $100,000 on that particular on that sale. So here's what those numbers end up running out looking like. So $5,000 of purchase costs. We've got $40,000 lost to purchase to commissions. We've got depreciation. That's only applicable on new properties in Australia. The laws on that changed not too long ago. If we sell for 1.1 million minus our agent's fees again and other selling costs for staging, we'd realize a little over $1,051,000. There'd be 708,000 remaining on that mortgage, which would mean we'd realize 343 on that sale. So that's how that looks. If we were to rent the place, I'm saying, let's say again conservatively, if it's $800 a month, what would that turn out to? So $800 a week, that would be 4 times 4.3, 3,440. This is what most people fail to do when they think about a real estate purchase decision, is to really run the numbers, see what it would cost. So that would be $41,280 a year. In the 20th month, once we've left, and I've got a loan amortization spreadsheet that I've run just here. In the 20th month, for that year, from the 20th month to the 32nd month, we'd be looking at $22,691 in interest. Property taxes, I'm taking a bit of a pot shot there. Vacancy, I'm assuming 2 weeks vacant. Renovation, we're saving that amount every 7 to 10 years to throw in new paints, carpets, and just improve the property to maintain that top of market rent. Looks like someone's got their hand up over here. Let's see what that's about. Did someone have a question?
You have to click on it.
Let's see. Someone was asking a question. Okay.
Oh, here it is.
It's Ralph. Ralph, please. What do you want to type in?
Click allow to talk. Or...
Do you want to type in your question? No, Ralph's not there any longer. Okay. All right. So insurance, allowing $3,000 for that. Property management, we're calling a similar figure. I'm using 6%. Renters repairs, this is just fridges breaking, pipes bursting, that sort of thing. So when all is said and done, we in this hypothetical example, we would be just breaking even. And to be honest, if that's what we did, I would be fine with that, because I differentiate between assets held for investment purposes and assets held for use. This would truly be simply offer us the ability to go back and have our own place when we're in Australia, and that would be just fine. Okay, so let's look at this loan amortization schedule. Looking at rates, we could certainly do better than that. The mortgage rates are slightly better than what they are in the US, but keep in mind, Australia's variable, the US is fixed. So always like to be that little bit conservative and ran what this mortgage, $800,000 30-year mortgage would look like. And that's what we're seeing is $3,266 a month. Throw on homeowners insurance, throw on some property taxes, $3,850. Well, that's interesting, because that's a little bit less than the rent that we would be paying. So why do I favor renting over buying? And the reason why is because when we looked at the neighborhoods that we're looking at in Brisbane, you don't actually get much for $1 million, which is interesting, because the flip side of that says to me that just as my good friend, a CFO at a ASX 100 company in Australia, he came to the same conclusion. He rented for 10 years before he bought, because he saw that the yields on buying a property now, what if we bought for $1 million, maybe we wouldn't get $800, maybe more like $600, in which case it's costing us money when we're not there. And I don't like the sound of that very much. So that's a little bit concerning to me. Anyway, another scenario that I ran here was the same loan at 4%, because remember, these aren't fixed loans. Presumably these rates aren't going to stay down as low as they are forever. So let's see what sort of sensitivity there exists in the budget, with these changes in interest rates. And it's not that big, but it's there. Anyway, that really is all I had tonight. So I just want to see if you have any questions. We'll come back to that in a minute. There was a lady who emailed me ahead of time, no names, of course, but she's a US resident, mentioned that she's got an Australian portfolio. And that made me think, my goodness, she's probably unaware of passive foreign investment corporation tax. Might want to read up the white paper that I've produced there. Anything that we've spoken about here tonight sounds like might be of interest to you, or you feel like my company might be able to help you with the sort of wealth management challenges that you're dealing with across borders, and feel free to reach on out to us. But at that point, we'll just stop and say, if you've got any questions, we'll be happy to answer those in the few minutes we've got remaining here. Waiting for those to roll. People, it's funny, people are still somewhat shy, even though it's a chat-based Q&A. Thanks, Craig. Hope you're well. Good to hear from you. I didn't know that you'd be joining us here tonight.
So while you guys are thinking of questions, or logging off,
There are a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Sorry, there were a bunch of questions that seem to be coming in. Anne asks, hi, we're thinking of moving back to Brisbane. Do you mind sharing where you're looking to live in Brisbane? No problem if you prefer not to. Really, where we're preferring to is driven by where we have friends who have similar aged kids. So yeah, it's largely driven by that. It's not especially close to my dad or my brother. Yes, this session will be recorded, by the way, Kylie. So this will be available online. Anonymous Matendi, have you considered reverse culture shock? Yeah, I have. In fact, I'm fully expecting it, to be honest. Fully expecting it. I live in Minnesota. Minnesota, nice. It still boggles my mind to this day when I see people here that have disagreements, and how incredibly civil and polite they are to each other. It was nothing like that when I was growing up. Let me tell you. Brett, really helpful, guys. Thank you. What is scheduled for next series? I mentioned that earlier. I'll be going into the financial side and the tax side. Is that Claire or Clara? Claire writes, why did you choose to get citizenship for the kids before entering Australia rather than waiting until they were in the country?
The answer to that is we really wanted me to get the longest visa I could. So the longest tourist stream visa, class 600, you can get is for a year. And they said you're much more likely to get that because it can be granted for 3, 6, or 12 months. You're much more likely to get that if you have Australian dependents. So that's why we wanted citizenship for the children, so that I could get the longest visa I could.
And thank you so much, Natalie. That is definitely plug worthy. Yes, I'll give a plug there for HelloFresh. We've been enjoying those deliveries for a couple months now. Fantastic. And if we could get that in quarantine, oh yeah, we'd be all about it.
There are some services in Sydney, prepared gourmet meal type services that you can get delivered in quarantine, and people apparently are very grateful for that if they're in a hotel where the food is not so great.
Colin writes, they're also struggling with the rent buy option. Would you be willing to share your analysis options sheet? That's really something for that I go through with clients, but it's right there. It boiled down to us, Colin, right now. What I'm thinking is all of the benefits available to a first homeowner. I would rather come back maybe in 3 years, 4 years, with a bigger down payment, higher income, and be able to really buy something that I'd rather just hold for that, from here on out, versus getting a starter, and then having something that in 5 years' time we're like, oh wow, we could afford so much more, and now we have to pay all the transaction costs, stamp duty, all those other things. Why not just wait? There's no issue with doing that. Mr. Robert Bressy. Oh, it looks like I skipped a few. I'll come back to those in just a second. You should definitely rent an exercise bike.
I've heard that.
Robert, thank you for the good tip. I have rollers. But I hadn't thought of that. Exercise
You can
bike.
rent equipment. I'm planning on doing a lot of yoga with the kids, streaming yoga. This person, Ann Patterson, wants to know if the next presentation will address business.
Will the next presentation address challenges of your business? No, that's not the next one. I believe that's January. And you will see those challenges firsthand from quarantine. So no, that's, and I'm not honestly getting too deep into that about the challenges of being a financial advisor across borders and how international compliance works. That's a topic more for the GFP Institute. Financial advisors care about that sort of thing. But it's more about how to, how to run a team, tax planning. There's a lot of stuff there. Remember the rates, the marginal rates between Australia and the US are very different. Australia doesn't care about, having an S Corp that doesn't pay payroll taxes. It has K1 dividend distributions. So we need to look at what accretive ways might we look at the business and time investments in the business rather to coincide with US tax residency versus Australian tax residency. Dion, how you doing? Good to see you here, mate. Are you worried about how locals will treat your American family? Not really. I think I'm most sensitive towards
he's
the
not
girls.
worried about it. I'm more worried about it.
The girls, I think, will lose their accents. I mean, 3 and 5, maybe they'll cop it for a week or two, but I don't know. I'm optimistic.
I don't think the 3-year-old will. The 5-year-old, I think she's just starting to get sort of socially aware and do my friends like me? She talks a lot about so-and-so in my class likes me, so-and-so in my class doesn't like me. I have a little bit of a concern that she'll get teased for her accent at first. I think she's very intelligent, and I think if she figures out that she's being teased for it, she already does a pretty good Australian accent, so I think she'll really try and do that quite a bit. I'm not worried about me. I mean, no, I'm not worried about me. They're so little. I'm not too worried about it.
Thank you for the tip, Kylie, on starting a Facebook group. We'll think about that. They will love you. My kids go back often, and most Aussies love their accent. That's good to hear. Thanks, Anna. Claire, thank you. And Dashi, any info on how to rent? That's not. I just found out like 2 minutes ago that you could even do that. Thanks, Russell.
For Mr. Roth, I'm not sure. That information comes from Facebook groups, how to rent exercise bikes, how to rent other exercise equipment, where to get decent food from. If you join the Facebook groups, Australians in quarantine, etc., you get a lot of that information there. Public school versus private school in Brisbane.
They're in kindy anyway, so it's not really.
Yeah, Jasmine, the little one, is not even in proper school yet, so she's in a community kindy. She's enrolled for community kindy, and then Elise is enrolled for the local state school.
Hey Nancy, hope you're well. Good to see you here. I got your email. I've just been snowed under. That's why I have not replied. I think that's about a wrap. Hey guys, so much support. Fantastic to see everyone here tonight. We had a phenomenal turnout, and we'll see you next month. Look forward to staying in touch. All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.